One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. And this is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here and that it's Halloween, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 41 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank, pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and also like, share, and subscribe, and be sure to leave your comments underneath this video. All of these actions convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets the show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel is still demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can also scan that QR code right here on the screen. And that way you'll be joining other friends of this program who help bring this show to the world every single week. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. We have a very big and fun show today, so let's get started. As usual, we have with us Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change. Well, what's up with that? We have Linnea Lueken. She's Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we also have producer Andy Singer behind the curtain, making the show look and flow great. The Archbishop of Rancherbury, Sterling Burnett, is off today. We'll have him back on the show next week. But we are very happy to welcome back a very special guest, Matt Wielecki. He is proprietor of the Irrational Fear Substack, which is a must-read and a much-subscribe thing for you to do. And he's also a former earth science professor at the University of Alabama. Roll Tide. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Jim. Roll Tide.
That's right. So we have a big show today. We're going to talk about really maybe the biggest climate news of the week, maybe of the month, the About Face by Bill Gates on climate alarmism. But first, as we like to start the show with a little bit of fun, and that is called the Crazy Climate News of the Week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. All right, so the first item here, oops, we got the wrong sidebars up there, but that's okay. I titled this first item, The Killing Fields. And this story comes from Zero Hedge via a climate skeptic. The headline is, Shock New Report lays out the full scale of environmental damage caused by onshore wind turbines. Let me read a little bit here for us. Fresh insights into the ecological devastation caused by onshore wind turbines around the world are contained in a shocking new paper published last month by a group of ecologists in Nature. That happens to be one of the most respected and popular journals of science, environmental science in the world. The paper is paywalled and has attracted little mainstream media interest, but it does highlight research that illustrates that the effect of utility-scale wind energy production can, quote, be far-reaching and sometimes have large and unexpected consequences for biodiversity. In short, the science team notes that turbines can kill birds, bats, and insects, change animal behavior, physiology and demography and alter ecosystems. The installation of wind turbines invariably results in habitat degradation, but it is in regions rich in biodiversity with minimal existing infrastructure that suffer the most. The authors state that wind facilities, quote, are recognized as an important driver for losses and degradation of irreplaceable habitats that are important for conservation. This Nature paper is a wake-up call about the increasing damage that is being inflicted on natural habitats by wind turbines that are steadily increasing in size and destructive potential. It is a summary of the latest findings about the effect of turbines, and it is not sanguine about the future. Quote, perhaps the greatest unknown in predicting future effects of wind power on biodiversity lies in the scope of the potential expansion of the technology and the cumulative consequences of this expansion for species and ecosystems, unquote. Now, this study goes on to note that 500,000 bats are killed onshore by wind turbines in the United States alone every single year. As far as bats are concerned, in Germany, the number is 200,000. Canada, it's 50,000. In the UK, it's 30,000. But what about birds? I'll read a little bit more here. Possible population collapse has been predicted for cinereous and griffon vultures in Europe and the Eurasian skylark in Portugal. Other predictions suggest population declines for hoary bats in North America, lesser kestrel in France, and black harriers in South Africa. Nearly 50% of bird species evaluated in one study in California were said to be subject to turbine-induced population decline. Meanwhile, the mortality of golden eagles at Altamont Pass Wind Resource in California is said to be so frequent that local populations are sustained by immigrants, meaning immigrant birds. That'll do it for that. So, Linnea, we've known about this phenomenon for quite a while. We've been reporting on this program and writing about it in op-eds and on heartland.org and on the Climate Realism site going back years. And now here we have a prominent journal finally basically admitting it. And as noted in the beginning of that segment, it's not getting a lot of media attention, but it probably should.
Well, no, of course it's not getting a lot of media attention. It makes wind even less popular than it already is. Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about this one, Jim, because it's something that we've known for a long time. It's something that certainly many of our fans have known for a long time. I don't know if there would be too many people, at least on the right, that pay attention to politics who would be surprised by this news. And it's unfortunate that it's not getting, mainstream circulation, because then, people who normally wouldn't hear about this kind of stuff would. But I suppose that's the whole point of keeping it a little bit under wraps, right? Yeah, I would say, if people want this stuff to get out, then spread it, because the mainstream media certainly isn't doing their job on this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Matt, the whole justification for all this wind power is because human activity, especially burning of fossil fuels and the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere, is going to cause a climate catastrophe. Well, wind turbines are a existential catastrophe for many, many species of birds and bats.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear these activists and they'll say, oh, but look at how many birds cats kill in cities. And I'm like, you're comparing pigeons and things like that to raptors and eagles. And these are very different types of birds. Their populations are very different. The reason the pigeons are there is because the city is there in the first place. So putting something into a pristine environment that is slaughtering these beautiful wild birds. I mean, if you think this is bad, just wait till the science comes out on offshore wind and the devastation to the marine ecosystem. I think that's going to be 10 times what we hear about these. And who would have thought that putting these giant spinning things out in the marine ecosystem would do damage? And, so I think that's where the real thing is going to be. But it's great to see that people are starting to talk about this. And I agree with Linnea. It's just making it less popular than it already is. I mean, this is a real uphill battle. These things are losing money. The companies that are putting them out are hemorrhaging money. The last time they tried to open up some leases, there were no bids around the UK shoreline. So I think this is really a failing industry. And unfortunately, nobody's going to go out and clean these things up. They're just going to sit out there and rot and just be a blight on the landscape for, I think, many years to come.
Anything to add to that, Anthony?
Well, I can say that this basically is just another demonstration of what I've always said about the climate change issue, and it's based on noble cause corruption. They think that saving the earth is such a noble cause that they're willing to overlook everything else, that's inconvenient or bad, in pursuit of that goal. So they just look the other way because our cause is more noble and we're saving the earth, and shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the proper way to look at wind turbines, especially when they're where they're placed, is that they are an invasive species that is destroying the native species there. Really, I mean, this study, I was reading a little bit more of it. It's not just birds and bats, but also insects. Now, you think about the impact of that. A lot of the wind turbines, they're just covered in insect guts all over the place. And so, but the bats, the bats are supposed to be, they're chasing the insects, which are up there by the wind turbines, and then they get chopped up. I mean, it's absurd. And for too long, the green energy zealots have gotten away with pretending, and the media helps them, of course, pretending that green energy is cost-free. It's not it's not cost-free to the birds and bats, that's for sure. It costs them their lives. All right.
They're not renewable.
Yeah, they are. That's right. That's right. All right, let's move on to our next one here. I've titled this Candy Everybody Wants. And if you know what that is a reference to, it's a song from the 90s. You can guess the artist in the chat. I'd like to see if anybody gets that. All right, this is from NBC. Chocolate Crunch sends Halloween candy prices soaring. Halloween treats are as sweet as ever, but the rising cost of candy may make consumers feel tricked this year. Data shows Halloween candy prices are increasing faster than inflation, a squeeze experts attribute to conditions in the cocoa crop climate and increases in confectionery manufacturing costs. 5 years ago, a 100-count bag of assorted Halloween candy would have cost around $9 a bag. Today, this bag would cost around $16, according to research from the personal finance website Finance Buzz. Quote, "The era of cheap chocolate is over," said Alexis Vasalis, assistant professor of agricultural economics at Ohio State University. Soaring cocoa prices in recent years have changed the equation for many chocolate makers. These prices have reached record highs amid poor harvests in West Africa, where about 70% of the world's cocoa is grown, Vasalis said. Rising temperatures, irregular rainfall, and crop diseases linked to climate change have devastated cocoa yields. Now, Anthony, you suggested this one for this week, and it's very holiday specific. And while global cocoa prices are up sharply over the last couple of years, it's not because of climate change, and certainly not because humans are causing climate change. Maybe you can explain.
Now, it's again, they're just ignoring everything that's not in pursuit of the cause, and this is the perfect case. What's really happening with chocolate is that there's a disease that's affecting the chocolate pods, and it's called black pod disease. And there's an article in Yahoo News that I recently highlighted, and they've just made a breakthrough in solving this problem. So what's really been happening is that there's been a disease that's been affecting these chocolate pods, reducing the yield, not just in one or two places, but all over the place. And they've been trying to find a solution for it. And because there's less cocoa being harvested, because they can't harvest stuff that's gone bad, the demand continues to be high. The supply is low, and it's a simple matter of economics. The economics says cocoa is going to be more expensive. It has nothing to do with climate change. But the problem with a lot of these people is that most of them that write these things or profess these things have never held a real job where they have to look at things like economics and make sense out of them. And so that's really all this is.
This reminds me a little bit of what the 2001 IPCC said, that East Africa, the Horn of Africa, was going to see reductions of something like 70% in its agricultural output in 20 years. That came out in 2001. So 2001. So it was 2021. So I checked that, and not only had they gone up, most of those nations had tripled, quadrupled their agricultural output. It's just, like Andy says, they find anything, they glob onto it, and then there's no accountability. Nobody will be able ever go back and hold these people to the fire when, if like Andy says, if they cure this thing and prices come back down because supply rises, then nobody gets held accountable. So they just keep this narrative alive, and there's no negative side. There's no downside. You only get bumped up because you got more clicks, even though you're basically lying to everybody.
Yeah. I think, Linnea, the biggest problem, as somebody in the comments put it, is shrinkflation. I look at the bags that we have. There are fewer candy bars in the bags. My $100,000 bar used to be this big. Now it's this big and this small, so that, to me, they're burying the lead on that.
Yeah, well, there's definitely less chocolates, especially in the bag, when you buy, for the same price as, a couple of years ago. But it is just because there simply is lower supply right now. There's no getting away from that. That is part of what's going on here. It's not just, companies taking advantage of people. It's companies desperately trying to keep the bag price the same. So they decrease everything else in there because people that don't pay attention aren't going to notice. But people will be even madder if they saw, the prices go up the way that they would need to. It's Climate Bell says candy corns have shrunk too. I don't know if candy corns have shrunk.
They can't get much smaller.
Well, those candy corns, who cares?
Yeah, no, we already established that on yesterday's show, Anthony. We're a pro candy corn, pro pumpkin spice program here. But
pumpkin spice is okay. Candy corn, man, that's just nasty.
That's how you get yourself kicked out of the show. It just takes one button I can press. That's it for you. No, we are definitely pro candy corn around here. Invest in candy corn futures based on the price of cocoa, I say.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this is the same kind of a situation that we have with oranges, and some other key crops, bananas. There's an orange tree blight in Florida that's just devastated a lot of orange groves. It's from a invasive bug from Asia. Would you believe it? And they try to pin that on climate change too, but really it's, global shipping. That's the cause for those things getting over here. And then what's the other one that they like to blame on climate change? So oranges, and what's the other one? Gosh, I just said it too.
Bananas.
Now it's gone. Bananas. Yes, there's a banana disease that targets particular species of banana. And so what they do is they have to tweak the genes on the banana to avoid the disease from killing all of them, or they breed a new cultivar. So it's a pain in the neck, but this is what big, large yield agriculture has to deal with. If you have a big banana grove, a big orange grove, big cocoa fields and forests and stuff, you're going to have big losses if a disease breaks out. So that's just the way that it is, unfortunately.
The separation.
Yep.
Yeah. Matt, I got a question for you. I've noticed that you've been drinking from this brightly colored cup. Yes. Are you drinking the Kool-Aid?
I'm drinking iced coffee.
No, we don't drink the Kool-Aid around here. That's for sure.
Scott, there is never a candy corn crop failure. That's why candy corn is the best thing to invest in. I don't think it even goes bad. So
Yes.
I dress up as a candy farmer every year, and I
mostly
always have a
wax.
harvest.
yes.
All right. Let's move on. And we have for us here today a Hurricane Melissa update. We have a video here that I want to share. And there are several like this one out there on X and other social media of a hurricane plane flying into the eye of Melissa. Stan Goldenberg, who's a friend of this program and a guest on this program several times, has done this very thing. And I think this is truly awesome in the very sense of that word. It's harrowing and beautiful, just amazing. So, Andy, go ahead and play that. Just amazing. And they say this is one of those stadium effects that happen when you fly into the eye of the storm. This was when it was a Category 5 at the time, and just the power of nature is just truly awesome. And the idea, kind of a theme of the show, that humans can have any measurable effect when these sorts of things happen in nature is really the height of folly. But you can turn the sound off on that Anthony, or Andy, if you want. But Anthony, we wanted to get an update on Hurricane Melissa, because we do cover the hurricane season on the Climate Realism Show every year, and we did talk about hurricanes a few weeks ago and how still even Melissa's not going to hit landfall in the United States, and it's one of the first major storms of the entire season, and it's quite late in the season. But even though this is the only real significant hurricane in the Atlantic to hit population centers, no offense, Bermuda, the myth that climate change and human activity causing climate change is causing a hurricane like Melissa, which did intensify rapidly, is yet another myth. And you can kind of break that down for us if you like.
Yeah, well, it's very predictable every time there's a hurricane of any kind of significant intensity, the media rushes, and I mean rushes, to blame it on climate change. And typically they get their marching orders from the group called Climate Central, which is from former meteorologist at the Weather Channel, Heidi Cullen, who said that people who TV meteorologist who didn't agree with that climate change was a big threat should be, basically defrocked, that you shouldn't be allowed to hold your degree anymore, that kind of stuff. She said that back around 2008, if I recall. But the point is that when you look at the data, there's no support for this whatsoever, that climate change is intensifying or causing more hurricanes. And so, it just, and that's what I did. This is a climate realism post that I put up a couple of days ago, and I went through all the different pieces of it. And, the first thing is intensity. Here's the accumulated cyclone energy graph. Now, what that is a measure of hurricane energy globally. And look at it. This is since 1972. Where is the climate change increase? It's not there. The amount of energy that hurricanes are expending into the atmosphere has not drastically increased. It would have to go up if hurricanes are worsening in intensity due to climate change. And then the other thing is frequency. When you look at the frequency of these, are just not happening. But here's the big thing. The IPCC, the thing that all of these climate alarmists point to as the Holy Grail or climate Bible, says there is no obvious linkage. If you look at that little yellow highlighted section there, tropical cyclones, they can't see any indication that climate change is causing it to be strong in the current period or in the future. Even in their modeling, it doesn't show up, and they love their models. So what's the problem? There isn't one. But the media would like to have you believe that climate change is going to swoop down out of the sky, destroy your house, ruin your livelihood, make everything more expensive, and so forth and so on. Why? Because it's a controlling mechanism. This is what we've always said. Climate change, alarmism, is about control. If they can keep people scared, they can force them into doing all kinds of things they normally would not do, like vote for idiotic climate change policy.
Yeah, Anthony, I think you're totally right. But also, have you seen they've shifted now? Actually, they've kind of admitted that they've lost on the frequency and intensity, so they're moving to rapid intensification.
Yes,
which is just an artifact of the fact that we can actually fly planes into hurricanes now, and so we can measure them hour per hour, and we have satellites. But we know that this was happening in the past. Things like Hurricane Pauline in 1997 rapidly intensified. We just didn't have the capacity to have it per hour and show exactly how quick it was going. So I think they see the writing on the wall, and they're shifting gears into this rapid intensification. But again, I think that's a losing one too.
Yeah, and the only rapid intensification that I've noticed about hurricanes is in the media rushing to cover these things about rapid intensification. That's it. Just they're falling all over themselves to jump on this new thing,
Yes, sir. All right. Well, that's your Hurricane Melissa update.
Maybe if they would seed hurricanes with candy corn, that would shut them down.
Yeah. Well, and Matt, you bring up a good point about, they lost on the intensity and the frequency thing. So now they're shifting to something else. Another thing that they've been trying to claim now, which is, whether or not it's true doesn't really make a huge difference. But the idea that hurricane season is shifting into later in the season, like peak is later in the season, or that it's shifting more westward, or it's hitting landfall on the Atlantic side less often. Like if you are looking for changes over time in smaller and smaller and smaller parts of a storm system, you are going to find them regardless of what direction climate change is going. If it were cooling, if nothing was happening, if it were heating up even actually as rapidly as they say that it is, then you're going to find changes over time. It's just the way that this dynamic system works. So It's just kind of, like I've said it before, but it's like weather hypochondria. You
Yep.
know, you've become convinced that you have something wrong. And so anything that's a divergence from what you have established as normal is proof that this wrong thing is even worse than you thought before.
And from a fundamental physics aspect, actually, climate change should reduce the frequency of hurricanes, because if you kind of go along with the narrative, the poles should be warming more than the equator, meaning the heterogeneity in the temperature between the poles and the equator will reduce. And that's really what drives all of these systems. It's having a temperature imbalance. And so if you're kind of smearing that imbalance out, then you'd predict fewer storms. There was actually a Nature paper that said fewer storms in the 21st century due to warming. And so, yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it seems like this is going along exactly how we had predicted originally, but it doesn't fit the narrative. So they're going to try to nitpick it, and do mental gymnastics and then until they can find something that fits.
I mean, really, what do you know, Matt? I mean, you're just an earth sciences professor. You're not a journalist.
Washed up professor.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah. You're not a journalist. So there.
You're not a journalist. So
That's right.
What do you know?
I've had a job.
Yeah, I'm a recovering journalist myself, so I understand how that works. All right. I have so we have some bad news for everybody here in our fourth item, that yet another tipping point has been passed. Oh my gosh. This comes from the always hilarious Guardian in the UK. Headline: change course now. Humanity has missed the 1.5C climate target, says UN head. Exclusive. Devastating consequences now inevitable, but emissions cuts are still vital. Oh, geez. Anyway, by the way, this journalist at The Guardian has a note at the top of the story saying, quote, "I am the first indigenous journalist to exclusively interview Antonio Guterres. How many others will listen?" Unquote. What does that have to do with anything? Who knows? Well, we do know one person who probably isn't listening anymore, and that person is Bill Gates, and we're going to get to him in a minute. But let me read a little bit from this story for us. Humanity has failed to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius and must change course immediately. The Secretary General of the UN has warned, probably for the 4,000th time. In his only interview before next month's COP30 climate summit, Antonio Guterres acknowledged that it is now, quote, inevitable that humanity will overshoot the target in the Paris Climate Agreement with, quote, devastating consequences, unquote, for the world. He urged the leaders who will gather in the Brazilian rainforest of Belém to realize that the longer they delay cutting emissions, the greater the danger of passing catastrophic tipping points in the Amazon, the Arctic, and the oceans. He said the priority at COP30 was to shift direction. Quote, "It is absolutely indispensable to change course in order to make sure that the overshoot is as short as possible and as low in intensity as possible to avoid tipping points like the Amazon. We don't want to see the Amazon as a savanna, but that is a real risk if we don't change course and if we don't make dramatic decrease of emissions as soon as possible." All right, that's enough. Anthony, let me start with you. I mean, is there any scientific justification for such claims? For instance, that the Amazon's entire climate, if say we get to 1.7 C warmer or 2 C warmer, it's going to completely change into a savanna?
Well, I'd like to point out that this same fellow, Guterres, said a couple of years ago that the oceans are boiling. Oh my God,
That's
the
right.
oceans are boiling. So, how worse can it get than that if the oceans are boiling, right? Well, he keeps coming up with something new every about 4 or 5 months. And it's like he never remembers what he said the last time. And he has no vision of self about how clownish he looks saying these things. And here's the deal. And you can go to climate@aglance.com, and we've got a section on the 1.5 degrees centigrade tipping point. Here's the deal. In Europe, we've already passed 1.5 degrees centigrade. We passed that a long time ago. And the 1.5 degree that they're hollering about now only happened because we had the huge injection of water vapor from the Hunga Tonga volcano back in 2022. We put more water vapor in the atmosphere, and water vapor is the biggest greenhouse gas. So we've already been to the 1.5 degree tipping point. and nothing happened. All of these claims that they've made about when we get to 1.5, ooh, danger, it's going to rain from the skies, stuff will, stop working, species will die, everything. I mean, the unimaginable manic panic that these folks have been pushing about this stuff, none of it came true. And so normal people like Bill Gates even, or maybe not so normal, he's a billionaire, but he's starting to see that these things are not coming true. And if these things are not coming true, then, well, the next time you say, the oceans are boiling or the oceans are, steaming or whatever it might be, you lose your ability to really drive any point home because your stuff that you said before has never come true. And people are starting to see that. And I think that's the most important thing. So as far as I'm concerned, go ahead and make these crazy boasts. It's all, it's completely harmless now because fewer and fewer people are believing this crap.
Our comment section is so funny. I'm just having a lot of fun just reading them.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, if you, as we talk about on the show all the time, and our wonderful chat participants mentioned, 1.5 degrees Celsius was pulled out of the air. It has no scientific meaning. It doesn't really and the idea that entire ecosystems are going to be completely flipped because of a few percent, a few, bits of a single degree of temperature, global temperature, whatever that has meaning, is going. It's crazy, and the message is just constant from the UN and from COPs on this kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I think 1.5 Celsius threshold is about as scientific as 6 feet apart. I'm actually digging into when this was brought up, and it seems as though some of the people that were in the room or at the meeting at the time all agreed that it wasn't a possibility, but then a lot of the economists and folks said that's the point. We want to set thresholds where we cross them because that will encourage people to give us more money. So the whole point was, let's set unrealistic thresholds. We'll cross them, and that will force people to get more money. If you look at the original IPCCs, the thresholds were like 5 degrees, and then it goes to 4, then it goes to 3, right? So there's been shifting the goalposts as they realize that the warming isn't going to be as catastrophic as they thought, because really the warming's not the problem, right? Nobody wants to go back to 1880, the end of the Little Ice Age, for sure not in Europe. I mean, it was devastating in Europe. Agricultural loss, disease, political infighting because of lack of resources. It was a very, very difficult time. So I don't think anybody was ever arguing the warming was going to be the problem, right? It was all of these add-on effects, these feedback loops, the billions of people that would be migrating. And since we're not seeing any of that, and the warming wasn't going to reach what they thought, they just keep moving the goalposts. And instead of it being 5 or 4 or 3, now it's 1.5. And of course, when we cross it, we say, give us more money because look, we're failing in doing it. I mean, it's the definition of insanity, right? We're doing the same thing over and over again and having the exact opposite result.
Yeah, and before we move on from this topic, and we will have Q&A later, so definitely get your questions in for Matt and for the whole panel here. But frequent viewer Ed Reed asks, is there any documentable adverse impact of climate change anywhere? And I think not. I can't think of any, yet we keep hearing these fables about climate refugees. Either they're already happening or will be here very soon. I mean, trying to think, the globe has warmed, as you've said, Matt, since the late 1800s, and that's been a net positive. Where is the negative?
Yeah, I like to say that the climate crisis exists everywhere except the observational data. It's in the culture, right? It's in movies, it's in literature, it's in music, it's in policy, it's in computer models. It's just not in any metric that we can actually observe.
It's truly the universal boogeyman, thinking Halloween theme here.
I mean, I would say that there would be over time net negative effects if your standard for what's negative is that things change. Maybe you really like it if you live somewhere and the date that the last snowfall of the season comes is pushed in the spring back a few weeks. I guess that could be a negative to you if you really like late spring snow. That could be one. I mean, it's gonna depend. It's a matter of scale, but it's certainly not a catastrophe. If you have a particular coral species or something that lives in one particular place and it doesn't like the temperature, the new like warmer temperature of the certain area that it's in. And so it migrates north a few miles or something. And it's not in the place that it used to be before, and you miss it. That could be a negative, but that's more of a like a human perception of how we prefer nature to be, kind of an issue, rather than like a fundamental, ecological negative. Change is natural. There's been massive change on this continent, even in the last just 1,000 years. Forget longer. So it's really relative. But one thing is for sure, and that's that the catastrophe narrative does not bear out.
I find it ironic that they essentially think that climate stasis is like the goal or the utopia, but they call us deniers.
Yeah, actually, that panel that negotiated the 1.5 degree threshold in the German people, they said that their goal of their group was to find a way to keep nature in its current state. That's insane. That's and in fact, Michael Crichton wrote about that commented on that in State of Fear. He commented on how there's really only two ways that you can go about having a nature preserve. If you want to actually preserve it in the current state, you don't want it to change at all, you have to be super aggressive about it. You have to really like keeping a French garden, you have to super aggressively maintain it, because it will change by itself, whether you want it to or not. Or you let it go, and you just have to be prepared that eventually it might become a grassland when you wanted a woods there. It's just the way that nature is.
Right. Yep. Bond villain stuff.
Yes, let's put everybody in a state of climate stasis, freeze them for the future.
Yeah. Jeez. Crazy stuff. All right. Well, we're going to get into the main topic here with Bill Gates, because this really is, I think, remarkable news. And we could look back at this as speaking of tipping points, a tipping point for the decline, if not the elimination, of climate alarmism. But before we get to that, we start the show with Greta Thunberg saying, today it's Friday, and we'd love to have a little fun with that. But we got news this week. Anthony Watts found this for us, that Greta Thunberg announces a plan to copyright How Dare You? So this may not be, I just want to say for our audience, we did not triple check the accuracy of this. And it is just a joke, I believe, but it is, I could see her trying to get away with that.
How dare you?
Yeah, there you go.
That's right.
When I posted this on WhatsApp with that, a few of the commenters said, I read all through this, and honestly, I believed it could be true up until the very end, where it says this is a parody, because, she does such outrageous, silly things. So who knows?
Well, if she got a dime every time we had a drop of the How Dare You on this program, she'd be able to buy a better boat. That's all I can say about that. All right, let's move on to our main topic, and this is about Bill Gates saying never mind. Like the where is her? There he is. From the old Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah, we should thank Charles Rutter for his work on that, and also on the cartoon about Greta in my direction.
Yes, for sure. Never mind. All right, so this was big. This is big news today, and I think it's worth getting into all the way around the panel and with our lovely audience. But I'll just read from the New York Times story on this. Headline: Bill Gates says climate change, quote, will not lead to humanity's demise. In a memo, the Microsoft co-founder warned against climate alarmism and appears to have shifted some of his views about climate change. Let's read from this. Bill Gates, the Microsoft co-founder who has spent billions of his own money to raise the alarm about the dangers of climate change, is now pushing back against what he calls a, quote, doomsday outlook, and appears to have shifted his stance on the risks posed by a warming planet. In a lengthy memo released Tuesday, Mr. Gates sought to tamp down the alarmism he said many people use to describe the efforts of rising temperatures. Instead, he called for redirecting efforts toward improving lives in the developing world. Quote, although climate change will have serious consequences, particularly for people in the poorest countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise, he wrote. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future, unquote. This comes just 4 years after he published a book titled How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. Tuesday's memo appears to amount to a major reframing of how Mr. Gates, who is worth an estimated $122 billion, is thinking about the challenges posed by a rapidly warming world. Michael Oppenheimer, a professor of geosciences and international affairs at Princeton, said Mr. Gates was setting up a false dichotomy, quote, usually propagated by climate skeptics, that pits efforts to tackle climate change against foreign aid for the poor. Quote, despite his efforts to make clear that he takes climate change seriously, his words are bound to be misused by those who would like nothing more than to destroy the efforts to deal with climate change, Dr. Oppenheimer said. All right. Well, yes, not misused, highlighted, and welcomed. Well, we'll take that. But I would say that while there is a temptation to mock Bill Gates, the proper thing, I think, to do here is to welcome him, not to punish him coming around to the right side of seeing things. He appears to be teachable on this topic. So welcome, Bill. You can watch this show every week. Go back and watch the archives. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll be able to help you out. Now, Matt Wielicki, you wrote a piece on your Substack, Irrational Fear, about this development. How significant do you think Gates's less strident position on solving climate change is going to be?
You know, I think it's huge. I think it's definitely something that we should be applauding. And it's common sense. It doesn't seem so radical. Anything he said doesn't seem really radical. I'm glad that he's finally admitting that it's the poor that will suffer the most. Unfortunately, it was the poor that were going to suffer under those UN policies that wouldn't provide people with things like LNG and said that they should just cook with yak dung instead until magically solar farm and induction ovens would appear in their huts. So this is just much more practical. I'm still not going to let him off the hook totally. I'm a little bit conflicted here. I do welcome him into the camp of just realism and practical environmentalism, but he was one of the major people that pushed this. I mean, I have a lot of his quotes in my article, and it's exactly the opposite of his sentiment now. So I'm just, I don't think you can just shift gears all of a sudden. The data hasn't changed. If there was some radical thing in the data and a new satellite was telling us something completely new and he had this change, okay, we could have that discussion, but nothing's changed in the data, absolutely nothing. And so to have this radical shift, to me, it's partly what I think is a UN salvage campaign. I think the UN is realizing that it's gotten way over its skis in a lot of this stuff. It's not really helping people. A lot of its policies are going to keep people in poverty, energy poverty, and things like that for decades longer than they ever would have had been if they could have just explored fossil fuels and if the UN would have helped to get some of that funding going. So I'm not letting him off the hook totally. I think he's responsible for a lot of this. In sub-Saharan Africa, this year, there'll be more people without electricity than in 2000. So 25 years, and there have more people without electricity. Now, obviously, the population has increased, but I mean, these are folks that could easily have natural gas plants and gas turbines and have some sort of access to electricity, not be cooking with cow pies. There's really little practical things that we could be doing, but because of folks like Bill Gates that was just pouring money into this, it really sucked all the oxygen out of the room. And in a world of infinite resources, sure, that's great, but that's not how the planet works. And so, there's literally counties in Alabama where over 70% of the people aren't connected to septic or sewers. So we really have environmental issues here in the US that we could be dealing with, but because of this kind of obsession with greenhouse gases that were really pushed by the Gates Foundation and by some of his other energy investments, those people have been essentially overlooked. And so I'm glad he's changing gears, but I think we should still keep keep him accountable for some of the damage that has been caused with this craziness.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on this, but Anthony or Linnea, you want to go first?
Linnea, I'll let you have it. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on this.
Sure. I mean, I've watched some of his talks from even years ago on climate issues or on his fake meat stuff or whatever, he's really not changed his perspective all that much. He's always been kind of the camp where he kind of waffles on whether or not this is going to be a world-ending catastrophe. He's always been a little bit more moderate when it comes to that kind of rhetoric. However, I strongly suspect that his backpedaling is very much in the same vein as the backpedaling of like Fink and a lot of the people who have recently started backing off of the E in ESG. And that is because they are recognizing the massive energy crisis that we have coming for us with regards to data centers and AI processing and stuff like that. If the AI isn't, a poppable bubble, but I think that eventually reality comes in and says, hey, look, you actually, like, Gates is fully aware, and he even said this, I think last year, that you cannot run a data center on wind and solar. No, it doesn't matter how many batteries you put in. It's just not, it needs consistent, reliable power. You can seriously mess up those computers if you don't have it. So they can run it on, connected hydro or something maybe, but other renewables besides nuclear just can't do it. So I think a lot of this backing off has to do with that more than anything else.
Yeah, it ironically, the lack of power, because the climate change zealots are pushing down, things like coal and nuclear and so forth. Preventing AI from proliferating might actually save us from Skynet being activated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Just
I mean,
unplug it. It's fine.
Well, I have. Let me just share some of my thoughts on this. But I think this is really big news because Bill Gates has been extremely important in setting the agenda at places like the UN and at their climate conferences and at the WEF. He has spent well more than $1 billion pushing the alarmist message and the agenda. In fact, alarmist journalism is funded in the legacy media, if not directly by Bill Gates. I haven't looked to see if he was contributing to that sort of stuff, but by other enormously deep-pocketed left-wing nonprofits. And globally, this stance by Bill Gates means that he appears to be giving up on this net zero push. And that is huge. Our friend Judy Curry, who's been on this program several times, she was on with Michael Schellenberger this week. And she said in reaction to this, quote, "The weakest part of the argument has always been that warming is dangerous." And that's what, basically Bill Gates was saying, hey, a little warming, whoopee-doo, big deal. And that's exactly right. But, to Judy's point, it's not just the weakest part, it's the only part of their argument. Because if warming up 1.5 C or 2 C over 2 centuries, is that what we're talking about? If that isn't dangerous, then this entire argument and the plans that are built around it fall completely apart. There's a reason why one of the most popular or prominent radical climate groups in the world is based in the UK. In the UK, it's called Extinction Rebellion. We're told that human-caused global warming is going to cause a 6th mass extinction event on this earth, presumably including us. We have other groups called We Don't Have Time. You see the signs everywhere at protests. There's no Planet B. Even AOC and Greta and others have predicted that we only have a few years left to save the planet. Those deadlines have come and gone, and Bill Gates is basically admitting that, yeah, that was all bullshit. And one last point, and this is important, and I'm really hoping to see real movement on this front, is that media and social media have suppressed any messaging that counters climate alarmism for years and years and years. The LA Times famously, about a decade ago, declared that they were not going to allow any op-eds or letters to the editor from anybody who countered the climate alarmist message. Not one. Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger in the Twitter files, they revealed that there was widespread censorship and shadow banning of accounts and tweets that countered the catastrophic anthropogenic global warming messaging because it was determined, and this is literally in the Twitter files, that it was canonical in Twitter that climate realism messaging was unhealthy content and needed to be shadow banned. And this channel itself has been suppressed by Google via YouTube for its content for years and years. And so, I guess the upshot for this is that Gates is not, it's not only the climate realists that have been skeptical and angry at Gates for things like, geez, wasn't it just a month ago? He says, hey, let's block out the sun. Wasn't that was his big plan? And he was criticized for that. But now all of the climate alarmists that are going to show up at COP30 are pissed at him too. So now I guess that's kind of fun to watch. But other than that, I don't know.
I wonder how many people are not going to go to COP30 now that had planned to go based on what's been happening in the last couple of weeks.
But they can drive down that beautiful road. They cut right through the center of the rainforest, ripping out all those trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Archbishop of Rancho was absent today, so I thought I'd fill in for him. Get that off my chest. But I really do believe that this could be a really big deal because it really changes the conversation to have somebody of his prominence and how much money he has spent on the green scams and pushing alarmism very, very hard. And he's basically said, nah. Now, he may be self-interested in that. There may be several reasons for that. He's obviously investing a lot in AI, and we can't have an AI revolution on, unicorn farts and, other bullshit energy systems.
Didn't Microsoft buy 3 Mile Island?
Yeah, that's right. A year ago. Yeah, they want to crank that up for AI, for data centers. So, that's how that works out. All right. Have I said it all? Does anyone else need to weigh in? Are we done?
I think we got it.
I think we got it. All right. I apologize for my domination on that, but I got up this morning pretty salty. All right. Before we get to the Q&A with Linnea, I need to tell you about the sponsor of this here program, the Climate Realism Show, and that is our friends at Advisor Metals. If you listen to conservative shows out there, and I do, I have a lot of favorites. You hear tons of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. So there are tons of options for you if this is what you want to do. But I want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and it's the man who runs the company, Ira Bershatsky. He's the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he does not employ those high-pressure tactics or other deceptive marketing ploys like you see from many in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when time comes to liquidate this very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent discreetly, directly to your very home. Oh, also, Ira is advertising on our program because he believes in our program and our messaging. He is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats, and he refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, and we are proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, or if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, please go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will be in touch with you to make the process very, very easy. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals, or you can click the UR code right here on the screen. And be sure to tell them who sent you, because while you're helping your financial future, you would also be helping us and this program. Thank you very much. All right, it is time for Q&A. Oop, we're going to get here in a minute. Here we go. Linnea, take it away.
All righty. Andy is just waiting on the button to cut me off. That's his goal with that drop every time. It's amazing. All right, hey everyone. Time for Q&A. Let's go. Mike D. Springstead says, doesn't cocoa face the same problem as coffee? Problems stemmed from undiversified crop regionally.
Yes. Yeah, because it's so densely packed together, and because they are, shooting towards specific hybrids and so forth that they want to use to make the yields bigger. They're all the same, and so you get this sort of monoculture going on. And so when some disease comes in that attacks this monoculture, it spreads everywhere, and so it makes it a real problem, just like with coffee.
Yeah, they have the same problem with olives in Spain right now. They plant the same species of tree, and it gets a root disease that can only spread if roots are touching from multiple trees, and they have them crammed into these groves so close that they're all touching. Yeah, It's a problem.
This was similar to in Chile. They had a giant wildfire last year, and it was in these eucalyptus groves that are they're not even native species, but they had all these giant eucalyptus groves, and it's like their sap is like kerosene. And so these things went up like crazy, and they were like, look, this is climate change, and didn't even look that, oh, wait, they just came in and took down the forest and put in a monoculture of eucalyptus grove, and it burned up.
Yeah. Fun fact about eucalyptus trees. A lot of eucalyptus trees were planted all over the world during the 1800s because they grow very tall and very straight, and they make perfect mast for ships. So back then when we were doing sailing ships, they needed to replace masts pretty regularly because, climate change would swoop down out of the skies and break the mast on those ships, right? So they had to have, a supply. So they planted them in places like San Francisco, Chile and so forth, because, that's where the ships would put into port and they needed repairs.
Interesting.
Golfpot says we need a chocolate lockdown. That'll fix it. No. All right. Ed Reed, a frequent viewer of ours, says, is climate change causing more fish storms?
What? Are you talking about like when tornadoes suck up fish and then deposit them downwind somewhere or something?
I think fish storm is a term for some kind of hurricane, but I'm not sure.
The ones that are out at sea that
water.
they never recognize. No, I don't think so. It's being mitigated by the fact that we have superior technology now, and we can watch every corner of the globe and see it on real time on our computers in literally seconds.
If you read some of the wackos on X, we can steer them now and move them away. And if you watched the video Jim played, to imagine steering a thing that gigantic just shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the energies in the atmosphere and the energies that we could produce.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Palmer says, I'm concerned about who he'll appoint as his successor. Is there anyone more unhinged than Guterres? I think he's talking about the UN Secretary General.
Right.
I think it's already been picked.
Yeah, I actually don't know how that works.
It's going to be the New
bring
Zealand.
Back Bakari from the dead.
No, it's
Zombie
the New Zealand
Bakari.
lady. Who is the lady in New Zealand who had some of the craziest? Jacinda
Ardern. She's going to be the
yeah.
UN Secretary General.
That's my understanding, and I so don't quote me on that, but I did read that somewhere. I thought it was announced.
That's called the Heartland Institute Podcast Jobs Program. That's what that is. We're going to stay on the air for at least another 10 years now.
Yep. All right, cool. We're all right then. All right. Scott Clay says, do you think President Trump would refer to the UN's want-to-be dictator as a low IQ individual? I don't know, Scott. He probably would. But if he doesn't, we will.
Yeah, give him time. Maybe if he comes up with another statement like the oceans are boiling before he hands the baton to Jacinda.
Joe Tripp says, is NOAA in the climate prediction business? Why is so much weight given to the alarmists at the IPCC?
Well, NOAA is in the weather prediction business, and they do some long-term weather forecasts that they tag as climate predictions, but aren't really climate predictions. They do predictions out, 3 months, 6 months, that sort of thing. And by the time they get out to, 6 months, these things are pretty much, a coin flip. They have maps that they create at the National Climatic Center, NOAA's Climatic Center. They basically say even chance of precipitation going one way or the other. Stuff like that, even chance or better than 60% chance, of it being warmer here or colder there. It doesn't really, do much for anybody at those. As far as can you put the question back up? Because he said something about the IPCC. Why is so much weight given to the alarmist at the IPCC? Well, it goes again back to this thing I said earlier. It's noble cause corruption. These folks are godsend. They're saving the planet. These pure-hearted scientists who take no money from big oil, are out there to save the planet, and we should listen to them because they only have our best interest at heart.
Anthony, I agree with you that NOAA was mainly weather, but they were one of the biggest propagandists with their NOAA $1 billion disaster chart, which I tell people, if you're measuring Earth processes through dollars, you're a pseudoscientist.
Yep.
Yep.
I just wanted to tell our viewers here, our resident New Zealander says that he is so sorry. Jacinda is looking for overseas work because she's not welcome in New Zealand. So Chris personally has inflicted all of us with Jacinda.
I do not forgive you. I do not forgive you, Kiwis. Thank you.
Quarantine the whole island. No one's allowed to leave.
Yep, let's just put the whole island under quarantine. That'll solve that. Matt, I'm surprised you're mentioning about if you're measuring climate change with dollars. I'm surprised that it hasn't shown up yet. Some kind of a thermometer that measures climate change in dollars. I bet somewhere, somehow, somebody's thinking about that.
Well, I'm about to go on to Super Grok right now and make it. One side Fahrenheit on a thermometer, and the other side will just be billions and trillions, and it'll just... So that'd be perfect. Does anybody else think that Jacinda looks a little bit like Skeletor from He-Man?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just making sure I wasn't. Okay.
Well, that's what happens when you eat only tofu.
She's actually more evil than Skeletor, though, so be nice to him.
You're right.
Oh.
All right. Bo Gus says, from what I read, it sounds like Bill Gates is lining up with Lomborg. Thoughts? I wouldn't put him there. Nah.
Shifting in that direction, but I think there's an ocean between them.
Yeah, it's probably the best case scenario, but that's far off from where he is right now. It's still an improvement.
Roy Epen, who I have not seen in chat before, so welcome, Roy, says, what scam will Gates now use to take our money?
Well, they'll probably come up with a new version of Windows that is climate change safe or something like that,
No, I just want to say it's good to see Roy watching the show and in the comments. He's a frequent attendee to our climate conferences over the years and a good friend up there in Canada. Hello, Roy.
He seems to be shifting to agriculture, right? I mean, that seems to be a big shift. And if you look at some of those kind of processed meats, the synthetic meats or beyond and things like that, there's been multiple articles that these things are 20, 25 times worse for the environment than actually just natural grown beef, grass-fed beef. And so, it seems that the shift is agriculture. I don't really know where it's going to go, but isn't he the largest landowner now in the United States?
Something like that.
Yep.
But I think, didn't Impossible just go out of business, or one of those just went out of business? Maybe Beyond Meat, one of those. Anyway, it's not a good investment at this point. Let's see. Alan Griffiths asks us if we can get Alex on. I think we are trying to get him on.
Ask that. I actually invited him to the program for this show, but he was otherwise engaged and could not attend, but gave it some consideration.
Yeah, he's a friend of Heartland. He's been at our conferences before, so he's cool. Robin over on X says Gates recounting his lies on climate, but his lab meats and lab butter is dangerous as well. This isn't really a question, but I mean, I would say it's mostly probably dangerous because it has such high sodium content, from what I understand. The lab meat substitutes tend to be not so good for you in terms of that, but
it's the definition of ultra processed food.
Yeah, 100%. And here's the thing: is we talked about Bill Gates and the vaccines he wants to give to cows and cattle to prevent them from producing so much methane, right, and all that stuff, with the justification that we can't keep heating the planet with this human caused greenhouse gases. Well, he just said Tuesday that that's not really that big a deal anymore. So is he going to have to give up? Because the whole justification for lab-grown meat and all this other nonsense is to save the planet. Well, if he doesn't think a little warming over the next 100 years is that big a deal, then all that goes away too. It's contradictory, but better than his positions were, a month ago.
Yeah, and a related question that just popped up in the chat is how much do you think the U.S. from Energy Colonizer? How much do you think that the U.S. Senate investigating Gates has to do with his supposed narrative change on climate? I don't think it does, because I don't think the Senate would care either way if he would maintain that. Like, he's not going to get in trouble for being a climate alarmist. So, I think it's just he's having a bad month.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot more to do with money too. I think that he realizes that that side is drying up, and so he's shifting gears. He's like Jim was talking about earlier. He's been really driving the UN kind of subject matter for a really long time, and so he sees the wind's shifting. He's quick on it, and so he makes the shift right away. And I think it's kind of a salvage operation more than anything.
Yeah, and going right. I mean, this was not timed by accident to release this statement
Exactly.
just before COP30 starts, where he has spoken at many times and towed and amplified the party line, as it were, that human activity is causing a climate crisis and we need to act now. You contrast what he just released here to, that's why I included that in the rundown, what Guterres said. Now they're very, very far apart on those things. And for the globalists who depend on that money, who depend on the money from people like Bill Gates to keep this whole operation going, it's not going to be as fun at COP30 as it was at COP29. I'll just say that.
Tom White asks, burning fossil fuels emits CO, so carbon monoxide. What % of carbon monoxide is combined with free oxygen to form carbon dioxide, and how long does it take?
Well, damn it, Jim, I'm a climatologist, not a chemist. I don't know.
Very little, from my understanding. The O2 bond is really hard to break. There's not a lot of free radical oxygen in the atmosphere, so there's not a lot of just O. It finds O, it quickly bonds. So I think I would say very little, but I don't know for sure either, even though I kind of am a chemist.
Yeah, geologists are chemists. Okay, let's see. Pauly says doubling carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from 400 to 800 parts per million will cause a 0.71 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature, according to physics, according to Dr. William Happer. Is that really a problem?
I don't think so, particularly since it's going slowly. How long is it going to take us to get up to 800 parts per million? Quite a while. And so it's going to be a slow change, and humans are highly adaptable. Most species are highly adaptable, and it's not really the big crisis that it's made out to be. Adaptation is something that humans have done best throughout their tenure on this planet, and they live in all kinds of climate zones. We have humans living all above the Arctic Circle, in the tropics, at the equator, in the deserts, in the all over the place. They adapt, so no big deal.
Well,
I would also go ahead, Jim.
No, please go.
I would also say we don't know. If you ask Jim Hansen, he had a paper that she came out just recently. It says 5 degrees. He cranked it up, right? This is what we call the ECS, the Equilibrium Climate Sensitivity. So he cranked it up even higher than the IPCC. But all of this prediction, crystal ball stuff takes so many assumptions. You have to make so many assumptions to make this prediction that, let's just be honest, we don't know.
I was just going to say that, humans can't control the climate or the weather. We cannot control the ecosystem of the Earth on a global scale. And if we could think of a way to do it, CO2, a CO2 knob would not be a tool that would be useful for that anyway. So this whole thing is complete fantasy.
Andrew Godridge asks, so COP30, Amazonia, is anyone from the Heartland Institute attending?
Funny you should ask that question. We were looking at going, and I actually went through the process of doing the application, whatever. And fun fact, I actually got invited by the UNFCCC just out of the blue. And I think it was because they were desperate for people to show up. But I went through the process, and here's the crazy part. You had to, in order to attend the conference, you had to book a room in this very specific hotel, which I think is down the road there that they carved out. And if you didn't have a booking at that hotel, then you could not get a ticket to the venue. It was just nuts. But then when I went to go book the room at the hotel, get this, they don't accept credit cards. I'm not kidding. They did not accept credit cards. Either you give them your bank account information and they will make a draft out of your bank account, Or there was this funny money, money app that I've never heard of in the universe that you could use. And those things look like gigantic risk to me. So I just said, we ain't going.
Do they accept carbon credits?
No.
No.
Weird.
Hypocrites.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your answer. But there will be some realists attending, I believe.
Friends of ours.
Friends of ours are attending. So there will definitely be some mischief there, but we'll see. I have a feeling it's going to be a super boring one because I don't think anybody is going to go. I don't think Trump is
moping
even
around.
Yeah.
They paved over 8 miles of rainforest for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Scott Clay says, when will the authoritative paper on wind turbines killing the whales come out? I don't know.
Oh, you hinted at that, Matt.
Yeah, so I mean, Michael Schellenberger's been working on that a bunch, and the documentary that came out recently, I forget what was the name of that. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, if you just Google right whales, wind turbines, you'd find it. There's definitely work being done. I've talked to actually a few folks that are working on this. The problem is that if you're trying to push back in this stuff in academia right now, it's really hard to get any funding. If you wrote to NSF that you wanted to go investigate the damage being done to the right whale from the seismic, surveys that are being done to figure out where the foundations for these wind turbines go, you wouldn't get any of that money. So it's just really difficult to get this into the scientific literature right now. So it's kind of coming out through other channels like documentaries and things. But as this kind of shift happens, I think you're going to start to see that data. I think it's going to be pretty shocking. And especially how ironic it is that the Greenpeace started to protect whales and is now one of these big proponents of offshore wind turbines. Just really shows you that this really has nothing to do with helping the environment or saving the environment. This is a money-making scheme.
Yeah, and just full disclosure, the Heartland Institute's involved in a lawsuit trying to stop an offshore wind project off the coast of Virginia because of the endangered right whale. I believe there's only 79 female right whales that they've identified left, and who knows how that was a year and a half ago. So, yeah, this is a major thing. I guess the upshot, Matt, is that while it's hard to get government funding for such studies, or has been, that it does take a little while to repopulate the government with people who are not radical leftists from the previous administration. So it could be a more hospitable environment for such studies in the very near future. I hope so.
Let us hope so.
All right. Chris says, hey guys, maybe Heartland should hit Bill up for a wee donation. $1 billion or so would do, right? Yeah, that's a start. That'd be okay.
I'm not greedy. I'll settle for 200 million.
Wow. Yeah. All right.
For fifth. All
Pennies
right.
for Bill.
I called dibs on a new coffee machine.
It's work-related expenses.
Very high standards around here.
This is an interesting question from Randy, who says, did climate change help give us President Trump?
Well, maybe in a small way, but I think, the fact is that President Trump was just an absolute steamroller on policy. People wanted him because they wanted change. Climate change was part of it, but I don't think it was the driving force.
I think that the climate change stuff is just one of the many elements of the left going absolutely bananas that drove people to vote for Trump.
Speaking of Trump, he made a wonderful tweet this week about, winning the climate war, which I know is driving a lot of our friends on the other side of the aisle absolutely nuts. Andy, do we have that tweet from President Trump earlier this week?
He's looking for it. He'll get it.
Okay. All right.
I think we call it a truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, truth post. Yeah.
Yeah, the Truth Social. Not a tweet. I don't know. What do you call those things?
I don't know.
Social? A truth?
Yeah, I don't know.
Actually,
But we'll find it eventually.
we'll
Anyway,
find it. I got it.
thank you for the question, Randy. That was interesting. What will be... Okay, Jim Moses says, what other virtue signal are they going to try to monetize? We've said it before. I mean, Steve Malloy thinks that they're gonna go big on the plastics stuff, like more than in the past. I think he's probably right, but I don't know.
You know, I've written a bunch about plastics. The vast majority of the plastics that get into these oceans come from like 8 or 9 major rivers in a handful of small countries. If they were catching that and burning that as energy, that would do so much more for them, for us having and the fisheries and having plastics out there. But I always find it very interesting that plastics are both simultaneously so inert that they'll never break down in nature, but so poisonous that if they get into your body, they cause damage. It's like, my body must be doing things that nature can't do over 1,000 years inside my body. So I always found it very interesting.
Yeah, here's Trump saying, we just won the war on climate change hoax. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. It took courage to do so, and for that we are all grateful. MAGA. just, man, I love it. I love it. It's premature.
I'm surprised they didn't say
thank you,
MAGA,
Mr.
make climate great again, you know?
Yeah. It's premature, Mr. President. However, I appreciate it, and I like it very, very much. Trump always has to be first. All right. Kabluna says the EU and UN are doubling down on climate madness. How long do you think that can last?
As long as the money holds out.
With Bill Gates switching, we're not switching, but at least kind of having some criticism that money seems to be shifting. So, but yeah, that's what it comes down to, right?
Absolutely. That was my biggest takeaway from Bill Gates. Like if he's withdrawing some of his funding, I imagine that a lot of NGOs are panicking right now. And I think the Gates Foundation is shutting down. Did I read that right? I saw somewhere that the actual Gates Foundation is closing shop. I'm not sure if that's true, but I
haven't
seen
heard that.
Crazy. Judith Taylor says, will greening of the deserts and increases in crops not take care of some of the extra carbon dioxide? Anthony?
Well, yes and no. It will bring in some carbon dioxide, but remember, there's a whole respiration process that goes on. If you look at the graph of carbon dioxide since 1958 that's put up by NOAA and Scripps and so forth, and look at it magnified, you will see these little wiggles going along as it goes up. And that's the whole planet respirating from one season to another. Most of the uptake in carbon dioxide happens in the northern hemisphere because that's where the most land mass is. And so you'll be able to see that when we get to the summer in the northern hemisphere, the carbon dioxide goes down a little bit. So yeah, there will be a little bit of an uptake on that, but there we go. Perfect. Thank you, Andy. You can see that little wiggle there. That is every seasonal change on the planet in those little wiggles. So yeah, there's going to be some uptake, but if you think about the Sahara compared to this, that whole planet wiggle right there, it's hardly going to be noticeable.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. And this another science question from Jason Holt, who says, as the planet warms, will the tropics stay about the same, with most warming happening at the high latitudes, with warmer overnight lows and milder winters, or is it more uniformly distributed?
No, I think that's pretty correct. At least for what we see currently. We don't see the high temperatures changing dramatically. We definitely see overnight lows increasing. I would say that's a big artifact of the urban heat island effect and the heat capacity of things like asphalt and concrete and glass compared to dirt and soils. But it's definitely true that the original greenhouse theory was that the poles were going to warm more than the tropics. I use this as an argument all the time because the people say, oh, you're going to have mass migration. I say, well, all the people essentially live around the tropics right now. The vast majority, there's a great graph that shows population per latitude. And it's just, it's dramatic how many people live between the tropics, for example, the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And so to think that, okay, well, so the least amount of warming will happen there, and the most of it will happen at the poles, but yet people will still be migrating, the billions will be migrating. That would make sense if there was billions at the poles. So I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, when when it comes to migration, thinking about where you want to go, what human has ever said, I want to go on vacation in an ice-laden wilderness, right? I mean, there's a few people, they want to hike the North Pole or something like that, these thrill seekers. But for people that just want to relax, they don't want to go somewhere cold.
I'm an immigrant. I promise you, we didn't leave Poland because of the climate.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I hear Iceland is beautiful in the spring. Maybe I'll get there one day.
They got mosquitoes now.
Oh, forget it.
Oh,
That's
no.
climate change. There's mosquitoes.
3 of them. 3 whole mosquitoes.
That's right. That's right.
Iceland.
And it's great because I wrote about that too, and I showed that there's a great paper that shows that the July temperatures were like 2 to 3 C higher about 7,000 years ago during the Holocene thermal max. And so I'm like, oh, maybe this has to do with transportation and a global, global trade. And so, but of course, I was called a denier.
Yeah, I actually had I wrote about it on What's Up With That. I had a comment from someone who said, I wouldn't put it past one of these climate crazies to actually take some mosquitoes and bring them to Iceland, because we've seen people set fires so that they can claim climate change caused these forest fires or whatever. So yeah, thing is about these mosquitoes, they're not going to survive in Iceland. So, end of story.
Yeah. Arson is not climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Chris Nisbet asks, can we use the change of the rate of cooling overnight with given atmospheric makeup to determine the effect of CO2 levels?
I don't know how to answer that.
The wording on this is a little strange, Chris. We might have to have you reword this one.
I think you can, but if you did this, so I think what he's trying to ask is can you measure the urban heat island effect? Are we trapping CO2 through the atmosphere, or is the ground warming more and thus you're not cooling overnight as well? I think the best data set that we're going to have is the Ceres data set, the satellites that are measuring the long wave radiation that are coming off the planet, where we can get a global idea. So far, I would say those argue that we're not really making big changes to the amount of long wave radiation that's coming off, but that's a difficult thing to measure.
All right, I think that's all we've got. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Excellent. Well, yeah, that will do it for today. Another fantastic edition of the Climate Realism Show, which we broadcast live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We had several thousand people watching us live today, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being there, especially participating in our very lively chat on Rumble and on YouTube. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. And of course, thank you, Matt Wilicki, for being here with us today. It's always been a fun pleasure to have you on the show. You offer so much fun and so much insight, and we hope to have you on again very soon. Thank you, Anthony Watts. Thank you, Linnea Lueken. Be sure, our audience, I want to make sure that you visit climaterealism.com, where you can see at least 3 stories a week pushing back on climate alarmism in the mainstream media. climateataglance.com, where you see the updated to this year data that gives you all the information you need to push back at climate alarmism. Also, Energy at a Glance, and go to heartland.org, where you can subscribe to Sterling Burnett's Climate Change Weekly newsletter. Thanks again to everyone for being here, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.